Hey y'all, producer Drew here with a little story to kick us off this month. Our theme today is about preservation in all its forms. Preserving a memory, preserving a work of art, preserving history, and so on. And in a moment of irony that would make even Alanis Morissette jealous, while editing this episode, my working hard drive, well, stopped working. At that point, the episode was nearly completed, which meant all of my efforts in the editing room were completely lost. And yeah, life has a funny way of sneaking up on you. Luckily, the interviews were backed up, and so I was able to start over and bring you what you'll be hearing today. Preservation is important, and were it not for that, you would have no episode to listen to at all this month. A little too ironic, don't you think? So now that you know the story, please enjoy the episode that's so nice, I edited it twice. Let's get on with the show.
So Dolores Logan was a dear member of FAAAC. We lost Dolores a while ago, and Oliver Lee Jackson was one of her favorite artists. And so we wanted to honor her by acquiring this piece. I mean, I remember when we would have events like our annual Sip and Scribble, and I remember I turned around and this lady was dancing in the middle of the floor with a glass of wine, and she was just swaying to the jazz music, and I was like, I like this lady. I don't know what to make of her right now, but I really like this lady. And so I feel the same way about the art. At first you see it, you don't know what to make of it, but you like it. So we met with the curator, right? You know, we talked about the piece and, you know, what it meant to us, that sort of thing. So he understood that. And so when he came back and shared what he was doing, we were all blown away. I mean, teary-eyed because we could not believe it. You know, and then the title, Modern Rhythm, it just fits so perfectly, and he fits so many other artists of color into it, and it just tells this story about movement and rhythm. I've been to see it like 3 or 4 times. Every single time I end up in a conversation with somebody, you know, I'm kind of bragging. I'm like, yeah, you know, FAAAC, we acquired this piece for the museum. And people are like, wait, what? What is FAAAC? And then I started talking about the organization. Then we started talking about the piece, and then we started talking about Dolores. So I almost feel like I'm leaving with friends.
Welcome to Binder. I'm Ray McManus. You know I've said this before in past episodes when I get to bring Drew out of the booth and bring him in here with me, what a delight it is. But you don't understand when he knows he has to be on, even though there's no cameras in this space, he dresses a little nicer, he cleans up a little bit, and it's just good to see him that way.
Hey Ray, first of all, I did shave my neck this morning, so you're right.
I noticed.
Yeah, it's already grown back. I got a little 5 o'clock shadow going there. Do you know what this episode is?
No.
It's our 1-year anniversary, baby!
Has it been 1 year?
It will be 1 year when this comes out.
Holy smokes. Feels like it's been 10 years. Are you sure about that? It's not been 1 year, man.
That's a really bad sign.
Oh, wow. 1 year.
You know, we've done a lot of interviews now. I didn't do the math, but it's been a lot. Are there any like personal memories for you that you like really enjoyed?
This will sound completely cheesy to say I've loved every single one of them, because I have loved every single one of these episodes. The first ones are always going to be real special to me. I mean, I think, you know, those were coming out sort of at the tail end, really, of COVID before, you know, we were getting vaccinated and that sort of thing. And so it was one of the first opportunities really to interact with other people, which was a very powerful and very palpable experience. And listening to, you know, photographers who were here, and not just here, but we're also in other areas around the country with the protests going on, and hearing those stories and and then hearing the poets respond to those photographs, that left a mark on me. Those, to me, I think, were so special because that launched everything. But I would have to say, honestly, the most fun I've had in the whole year, Drew, is been working with you.
Buddy.
But it is true. We've been involved with the various things around the museum. I mean, you obviously do the videos, and when we were doing Right Around series, you were coming in and taking pictures. But working with you in this environment, there's a friendship being born out of it. How many phone call conversations that we have that we could do under an hour.
Exactly. And that was something I wanted to kind of get at is I think people don't realize, I think they think we just show up, jump in front of some mics and let it go. They don't realize there's a lot of work that goes into the show. We spend a lot of time planning and preparing, and we take it really seriously, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're very serious, me and Ray. Most people don't realize that about us. We're very serious. And in fact, I actually have prepared something to let our listeners know how serious we are. Do you want to hear it, Ray?
Absolutely.
Okie dokie. Is it better if I talk into the mic for you to hear me?
Yeah, man. Now I can finally hear you. All this whole time, you're talking. I'm like, I can't hear a damn thing you're saying. No, I'm just kidding.
This is Ray McManus in the morning on AM 1517. Good morning. I'm here with Ray McManus. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
What's up, Columbia?
And welcome back to Drew and Ray Try to Get Through Two Sentences. I'm your host, Drew Barron, and as always, our special guest is Ray McManus,
who is still sober.
Take it away, Ray.
This is Dwayne Stomp from Black Tooth. Coming up next, visit with my cousin.
I'll visit with my cousin next on the program.
My cousin? www. I always feel like, too, when I do that I'm adding a W to it, and I'm like, no, that was only 3 W's.
www. Well, here's how you know. If it spells a W when you put your fingers out, then you have the right amount. Ray, I've never heard the word used in so many different variations.
On Amazon, somebody wrote, great poet, came and talked to my son at his school, not suitable for children.
I don't do accents, man.
Man, I'm just me, man.
Accept me for who I am, okay? I'm here to tell you about CMA memberships. I've been a member since 1903. Yeah.
I'm going to talk about Rodden and his contemplation and dream.
I've been contemplating a lot about Rodden. And what was up with that guy?
Bring in that seasonal elf again.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm Ernie. The CMA seasonal elf. Oh, God. I'm going to be in like a hallway with no windows and walking and it never ends and that voice is coming down over me. If this doesn't show up on the outtakes, man, this is gold. Oh, my God.
So yeah, like I said, we take ourselves real seriously here, and now everyone at home also knows how seriously we take it.
But it tears up, and that has to be a drop in the bucket. But I'm gonna wipe my eyes out because I was laughing so hard. But I think that's one of the things that I love about being in here, because some of the things we talk about are heavy, and even if they're not heavy on a social level, they're heavy in the technical terms. And we've always been about trying to expose our listeners to the inner workings of the museum and all the different things, and without having moments for us to just unload and just get it out of my system, and which is mainly me. I mean, I know most of the time you're just placating and just, all right, let's just let Ray get it all out of his head. I'll play along, but then you got to get serious again, because he doesn't feed me. He doesn't give me anything to drink.
That's true. I don't. Ray gets nothing until he's done.
Exactly.
That's how it works. Obviously, all that's cutting room floor stuff, right? Like, it's not stuff we would usually put out to the public because we to your point, we do usually handle some like serious subject matter. Sometimes it would feel very inappropriate, right? But it really made me think about like what we keep and why we keep it. Just the idea of preservation and like why one part of a conversation is worth preserving and why maybe someone might not feel that another part is, but to someone else, it might be something worth preserving. You know, I think it's a complicated thing, especially for museums, because that's a big part of what we do as an institution is we preserve things. And it sort of inspired me. I wanted to do something fun for our 1-year anniversary. Knew how much you just loved me berating you with questions. So I brought you a new game.
All right. Yay.
This one's called the Conservation Quiz. Yeah. Listeners, feel free to play along at home. I try to make this one a little bit more interactive. So if you get them all right, good for you. No one's going to know. But
if you get them all wrong, tell everybody you got them all right.
Yeah, exactly. See, are you ready to get started?
Man, I was born ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Question 1. In 1966, the city of Florentine, Italy was decimated by a flood. Among the wreckage was a painting by Giorgio Vasari depicting the Last Supper. This painting suffered damage beyond repair, and the gallery wall, where it hung at the Museum of the Opera of Santa Croce, has been left empty to memorialize the loss of this treasured artwork. Is it true or false?
Wait, now, do I know this? Do I know this painting? I've seen this painting, right? The Last Supper?
Well, you know, there's more than one Last Supper.
No, there can only be one Last Supper. There would be Last Suppers.
He's right.
I'm going to say true.
All right, I'm sorry, you are completely incorrect.
Well, it
is false.
50-50 shot.
The painting was restored in 2016 with the support of the Getty Foundation. And the whole restoration process took about 10 years. This wasn't the first time it survived a major flood. By any means, it was the 7th time it had survived a major flood.
You'd have thought they'd have moved it.
You would have thought, but apparently it's pretty important for it to be right there.
Well, I got that one wrong, but I still could pass.
You could still pass. Let's find out. Okay. You got 2 more, right?
All right.
All right, so question number 2. There have been a lot of articles about people X-raying paintings and making surprising discoveries. One such discovery involved Picasso's famous Blue Room painting, which features a woman bathing in a bathroom. X-ray examination revealed a second painting underneath, a portrait of a bearded man wearing a jacket and a bow tie. Is it true or false?
I'm going to go with true. That sounds like that could happen.
You're right. This one is true.
Yes.
There's been a lot of discoveries from X-ray examination, actually. I mean, they found the sketch of a pin that would have been used in the hair of Mona Lisa.
Wow.
Yeah. Even a beached whale in a Dutch landscape painting of a beachside. In that case, they thought the whale was actually painted over by one of the owners of the painting and not the painter himself, because they didn't want to have a beached whale in it.
Yeah, why not? I mean,
yeah.
What a wonderful conversation starter.
Yeah. What do you think of my beached whale?
But now, wouldn't it have been cool, though, if the X-ray would have shown that behind the Picasso was a picture of 4 dogs playing poker? I mean,
to be fair, I didn't say that it didn't have that as well. All right. You're 1-1 right now.
Oh man, this one here is gonna. This is it.
And little peek behind the curtain, since we're gonna be real about how we do things around here, is this is totally cheating. Ray was given this answer earlier when we recorded a different interview, so we'll see if he remembers.
Oh my God. Okay.
All right. Ready?
Yep.
We've spoken a few times on this show about how exposure to light can have damaging effects on an artwork. To ensure that we are not harming works on view, we evaluate the intensity of light based on what unit of measurement? Is it A, light speed, B, foot candles, or C, sconce meters?
I am going to go with B, foot candles. Final answer.
Correct. Correct.
Because every time I hear it, I'm like, what the hell's a foot candle?
Well, I can tell you exactly what it is. It's the amount of light required to saturate a 1 foot square with illumina light.
That is not what I pictured in my mind. But
Yeah.
Okay.
Like illumina is more or less just the light's brightness, if that helps. A general rule of thumb would be like 5 or less foot candles for work on paper or photograph. Glass and ceramics can be up to 20. Obviously, we put more light on there so people can actually see it. Ray, I don't know a damn thing about restoration. I don't know anything about conservation. I have a couple of microphones and like to pretend like I know what I'm talking about, if that hasn't become obvious by now.
It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm going to bring in someone who actually knows what they're talking about to talk to you. Please welcome to the stage, Mike Dwyer.
I'm here with Mike Dwyer, the chief preparator and exhibition designer here at the Columbia Museum of Art. Mike, you've been here for, 30 years or so?
Coming up on 30.
Let's talk about that. I mean, so what exactly is your role? And then give us a detailed account of the entire history that you know. But talk a little bit about, the history of what you've seen in that role or in other roles here at the museum.
Sure. I actually first started off here in security, kind of got my foot in the door at the museum that way. And then was lucky enough to get hired into the curatorial department back in '95 as a preparator. So the preparator prepares things for exhibitions. I do all the matting and framing and hanging the shows, deinstalling the shows. So all of that kind of hands-on stuff with the art, any art movement in the museum, anything that's getting prepared for shipping, and it goes through my hands. So I did that for a few years and then got a promotion to be exhibition designer. In that mode, I'm sort of working with the curator of the show to make decisions about how the show is going to look, from art placement to picking out wall colors that we're going to paint the galleries.
You're in a unique role of seeing it come in, seeing it unpack, and seeing it go up.
Yeah, the unpacking often feels a little bit like Christmas morning.
I bet.
You've sort of prepared in advance and you've planned the show looking at little thumbnail images of paintings or sculptures or what have you. And then they finally arrive and you open up the crates and you're like, wow, this is kind of impressive,
And you're actually handling all of this stuff.
That's right.
I mean, which has got to be really cool and really scary, I would imagine. Do you feel like, if I drop this, it's over, I'm done?
Yeah, it can get in your head if you're thinking about this object is 5,000 years old or something and, be very careful. But, I think in a way, one of the bigger dangers is when you've done the art handling gig for a long time and you can get complacent if you're not careful and sort of reminding yourself to be mindful of what you're doing. You think, I've done this 100 times, and then that's when you can make a mistake just because you're not being really focused.
Sure. Now, but you are also an artist, correct?
That's right.
So what do you typically do?
I'm mainly a painter. Color is, front and center in terms of what I think about. But I tend to look at almost all artwork, whether it's a, painting of a still life or a landscape or a portrait, through sort of abstract lens. So I'm looking at it in terms of composition and shapes and colors and line and movement and texture and these sort of things more than the actual subject matter.
Yeah. So does being intimately connected with the art that you are putting out in the museum, does that, I hate to use the word inspire, but
no, it does. I have no problem with that at all. I mean, it's inspiring and it's educational. And, I think I've probably learned more from being in this museum doing the job I do for, 20 some years, more than I got out of art school. But that's probably just the length of time,
Sure.
If you're spending day after day around all kinds of interesting art and all kinds of really good art, you just absorb a lot of information. And a lot of other people here in the museum that I work with are, interested in art, so we have interesting conversations. You're learning from the art and you're learning from the people that you're working with, and it's totally inspiring. I mean, I'm exposed to, like I said, thousands of years of art history and work from all around the world. It's definitely seeped into me, over the years, and it makes me want to be better at what I do, and it helps me see more clearly what things I value in art. Over time, that crystallizes more for you.
Yeah. I would imagine, when you were talking about, having to handle work that might be 5,000 years old, there's a lot of conservation involved in that, a lot of preservation involved in that. I have a hard time keeping something looking new 5 days, but 5,000 years. I mean, so what goes into all of that?
Well, climate control is important, right? So we try to really keep temperature and humidity very carefully controlled. Within the museum, you've got guards, of course, that are playing an important role in terms of keeping the artwork safe. We have, a very safe collection storage area with good equipment in it, like cabinets that will resist even earthquakes. Light has to be controlled very carefully. So that's a pretty big part of what I do. So, light is always going to be damaging things, including us human beings, and it's cumulative. And so we watch the, number of foot candles that we're shooting out of lights at objects, and also, the duration of time that the object is being exposed to light.
Right. And you have art that's in so many different mediums and, so many different surfaces, right? So, glass, canvas, paper, I would imagine all three of these things, or at least in just those three things, light affects it differently.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So one sort of rule of thumb or easy way to think about that is that the more absorbent an object is, it'll absorb more light energy, and so therefore it's more susceptible to damage. So a work on paper is more vulnerable than an oil painting. If you have a piece of glass or ceramic that's got a very glassy surface, that's reflecting a lot of that light energy back at you.
So the low light gallery is really a good place to be able to put the things that are going to absorb. And in this particular case with like Modern Rhythms, where, all of it is on paper.
Right. And in that gallery, it is 100% LED. So the nice thing about the LED is that it emits a very low amount of UV radiation. Right. Most people are familiar with that being, ultraviolet part of the spectrum is the most damaging, whether you're talking about a painting or a person or what have you. So even though UV is the most damaging part of the light spectrum, most of the damage to art that occurs in museums is done by the visible part of the spectrum. And that's because museums tend to do a pretty good job of reducing the amount of UV. But that low light gallery is on a motion sensor, so it's only going to be lit when somebody walks in there. That's a real major reduction in the amount of time every day that room is lit. Right.
When those things come down and they're part of the permanent stuff that we have here, are they stored in an area where they receive no light?
Yeah, they're in museum boxes or in flat files in collection storage. So, we might put a work up on view for 6 months. Oh. And then have it resting in storage for 6 years. That's kind of a rule of thumb.
And then, if light does begin to damage, I mean, I'm assuming then, is that irreparable? Is that a way that you can still salvage work?
It is permanent damage. Whenever things are damaged by light, it's irreversible. So really what we have to do is work on preservation. Of course, all light is always doing some damage to almost everything. So it's really just about saying what's acceptable, because we can't have museums with visitors enjoying artwork without light.
Right.
Yeah. So the only really safe way to keep these things forever and ever and ever is to have them in a black box, just no light whatsoever. So it's about compromise, and we want to give the viewers a really great experience when they come here, enjoy the artwork, but then we also want the artwork to be preserved for centuries.
Mike Dwyer is the Chief Preparator and Exhibition Designer here at the CMA. He has been in the museum for nearly 30 years, so if you've seen any exhibition here in the last 3 decades, he's probably had his hands on it. Coming up, we'll meet someone a little newer.
If you're listening to jazz, you're actually engaging very closely with abstraction.
Michael Neumeister, after this.
Hey y'all, producer Drew here to fill up your social calendar for September with some exciting CMA programming. On September 8th and the 14th, take a tour and get a new perspective on Amanda McCaver's Bright Little Day Stars with volunteer coordinator and installation assistant Jackie Palmieri. On September 22nd, grab a cocktail and a seat for a panel discussion featuring Carol Suvion, executive producer and director of the Peabody Award-winning and Emmy-nominated PBS series, Craft in America. On September 25th, get your dancing shoes ready for Shea Alexander Presents Live on Boyd Plaza with popular Charlotte-based outfit Reggie Graves and Jazz Theory. You can find out more about these and all of our upcoming programs and events on our website, www.columbiamuseum.org. And now, back to the show.
I got into art kind of weirdly through music. Music is a very tribal thing. And that becomes an aesthetic, right? It becomes the clothes that you wear. You could recognize your tribe, quote unquote, by, the band shirts that they have on and stuff like that. As you get older, your musical horizons broaden when you realize that sort of that tribal part isn't actually so useful. But it doesn't mean that the music is less significant. I think it's interesting that, I might have been listening to Master of Puppets and in some ways responding to the lyrics in a way that is shaping my worldview, or at least I'm responding to it. These people think like artists. Musicians think like artists. Artists think like musicians, and writers think like visual artists. And it's all sort of interesting and funny. The more people that I talk to in all of those worlds, the Venn diagram just kind of keeps expanding and making itself known to me.
Well, I'm here with Michael Neumeister. Michael is the newest curator here at the Columbia Museum of Art, and from what I understand, de facto the best curator at the Columbia Museum of Art. He's the only curator at the Columbia Museum of Art.
This is true, yes. For now. But Michael, we're glad to have you here, and love to know more about you. So, tell our listeners, who you are, where you came from, Sure.
what you do here at the museum.
Yeah. I came from the American Federation of Arts in New York, where I was an assistant curator. That's an organization, it's kind of idiosyncratic. It's a non-collecting institution, but they travel exhibitions. So we would organize shows from museums all over the country, sometimes all over the world, and sort of place them in different museums, including the Columbia Museum of Art. Historically, we've done a few shows with them. So I was familiar with this institution. And in fact, I have family in Columbia, so I had visited this institution a few times. And I remember in 2017 or 18, coming here, there was an exhibition up by my predecessor, a show on the artist Katie Pell, who's recently passed, actually. Mm-hmm. And I just remember at that time, the renovation wasn't complete. And I remember pulling up, being like, where do I park? Is this place even open? The plaza wasn't done. But there was this huge sort of billboard on the side of the building, which had Peter Frampton's face on it from Frampton's. Yes. And I was like, wait a second, what is going on here? I thought it was amazing because one of the things I always think about is that relationship between high art and mass culture. I think that's a way to get people in. And I always ask myself, when I'm mounting a show or trying to conceive a show or even an acquisition, I say, what would my parents think about this? Like non-art audiences. What would my grandfather think about this? What would the local parishioners at the church think about this? And all of these things sort of guide my curatorial ideas, because it's really important, not just for the Columbia Museum of Art, really for any museum, to expand your audience without alienating your existing audience. So I thought that was really smart and kind of audacious, actually, in the coolest way possible, to have that very clear cultural reference that like my parents' generation would really connect with. When you walk into a museum, especially like, there's wonderful places in New York, of course, it's some of the greatest art collections in the world. But if you walk into some of those museums and you don't know what's going on and you're not familiar with contemporary art or whatever, you're lost.
Right.
You're completely lost, and it just is what it is. That'll fly in New York, because there's 8 million people and there's enough tourists to sustain all of these places all of the time, no matter what. But in a place like Columbia, you have to be a lot more honest, I think, and I like that. Yeah. I like the fact that it keeps you honest. I am also interested in pushing the boundaries of what we have in the collection, though, and I'm also interested in exploding people's ideas of what art is and what art can be. For example, we don't have, to my knowledge, any video art in this collection, and we've not shown much. I think we have one VHS. We actually have a Warhol film on VHS, which has never been shown, of course, and I don't even know what's on it. We don't have a tape player here. But yeah, I think that bringing digital art into this place could be really great, because then what about filmmakers? Art on film is very different from Hollywood, but at the same time, isn't there going to be overlap, and wouldn't that bring in a different kind of audience? I don't know.
Right.
So I try to think about things expansively.
And thank you for that. I think that we came into our roles very similar. It's a common thread that I usually talk about, not having, books in my house growing up. There were certainly no books of poetry. My parents weren't, writing poetry,
Right.
So I went going to poetry readings. I didn't really know anything about it, but I had music, and there was poetry in the music, and I wouldn't have recognized that fact about it then, in as much as I was just driven by, the ethos of, whatever the genre was that I was attached to at the time. So,
I'm a metal fan. I'm a huge metal fan and a guitar player. So, I'm into metal and hardcore and 70s guitar rock and things like that. So the Peter Frampton was actually a very directly speaking to me in some ways. I was thinking also about something you just said that got me thinking about poetry and visual art being very similar in some ways, because they're both sort of difficult.
It can be, yeah.
They're difficult. Well, put it this way: like a lot of people will read a novel, but not many people are reading books of poetry.
That's true.
And it just is what it is.
I feel that, Michael.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I had a feeling. Even it's true for me. Like I try to keep abreast of contemporary fiction and things like that. I read a lot of American authors, and I read very little poetry. I find myself reading historical poetry more often than contemporary poetry. That might just be because I just don't have that much time or something.
Sure.
But, it's also just probably indicative of the fact that poetry is quote unquote harder, just like abstraction is quote unquote harder than figurative art. And I'll ask, again, back to the tribal idea, like if you're into music, you might not be into art, and you might think that abstraction is just a scam or whatever, that Pollock had no significant contribution and it isn't worth your time. But music is the only inherently abstract form of art that there is. And just the very fact that, in a song or a series of notes or some rhythm can bring you to an emotional place without any words or without any further context, that is abstract art in a nutshell.
Right. Well, actually, what that is a wonderful segue, I think, for us to talk about modern rhythms. This was your first thing that you've done here at the museum, right?
Kind of, yeah. Well, there's a lot behind the scenes, but this is the first
in your role.
This is the first public thing that I did. We're very fortunate to have this low light gallery. It's a small gallery in the permanent collection where the lights turn on and off based on whether people are inside or not. So it appears dark if you're looking at it from the outside, but when you walk in, the lights go on, and we do that to maintain low light levels for works on paper, which are subject to, very limited exposure times
Right.
to maintain them for posterity. So we also have a very deep holdings of works on paper. I think there's maybe 7,000 or 8,000 works in the collection, and maybe 2,000 of them are works on paper or something like that.
Wow.
Don't quote me, but it's a high number like that. So we have really rich holdings, and we need good ways to rotate these out and show them, and show them for as long as we can, really. So I was given the idea that, hey, we just got this new acquisition by an artist named Oliver Lee Jackson. It's a monotype. It's a nice size work on paper that really reads like a painting on paper. And it came to us through one of our great affinity groups, the Friends of African American Art and Culture. It's the first acquisition that they made for the museum, although they were founded 10 years ago. They're very active in programming and event planning and fundraising and things like that. But this is the first work of art that they actually purchased for the museum in honor of one of their board members who passed, Dolores Logan, who was a huge benefactor of this museum as well. So the work that they purchased, with the guidance of my predecessor, Catherine Walworth, and also guided in part by Dolores Logan's collecting habits, actually. They purchased a work by the artist Oliver Lee Jackson, who is a mature artist who's working mostly in an abstract mode and who is absolutely incredible, really articulate if you ever watch any of his videos. And the thing that really drew me to his work is the fact that he is very much interested in jazz. And he had this great relationship with the free jazz saxophonist Julius Hemphill in the late 60s, early 70s. He actually made some album covers for Julius Hemphill and was very active with a group called the Black Artists Group, basically a group of artists, mostly musicians, who were working out of St. Louis in the late 60s. So basically I was given this task, hey, what can we do with this work? We need to put it on view for the first time. And I totally pulled on that thread of modern art and music. So we have this beautiful monotype that really speaks to this idea of improvisation and this idea of having a rhythmic quality visually in the work. My colleagues were very helpful in the curatorial department because, of course, coming new into this collection, I didn't know much about what we had in storage. So I was guided by them and did some digging around of my own and realized, of course, we could have a wonderful little show on this theme and have works by Romare Bearden, for example, who was, in fact, an aspiring songwriter in the 1950s before he fully committed his energies to the visual arts. He actually had a minor hit with a song called Sea Breeze, which was covered by prominent jazz musicians and was a minor hit in its time. Also, thinking more expansively about it, we have a work by Bridget Riley, who is an op artist, whose work you may not think immediately of music, but in fact, she was really reading Stravinsky's writings in her formative years, sort of in the 1960s, and was totally inspired by the thoughts and ideas and approaches of a modernist composer. So we were able to put this together, and another work is something that hasn't seen the light of day in a while. It's a work we acquired in the 80s by Wadsworth Jarrell, who was part of the Afro-Cobra group in Chicago in the 1960s, and it's basically a group portrait of several jazz musicians, sort of this imagined scene, including Dizzy Gillespie, for example. So really a cool thing for me to work on, something I was really excited about, and hopefully it met the expectations of our audiences.
Well, I mean, I'm certain it will. It truly is. I mean, and I love that little space. So our listeners, when you go upstairs and you see, and it is dark, but it is open. So when you walk in, literally the lights come on. It's kind of cool. You feel sort of godlike in a way. But I love how you built it around the Jackson, so when you walk in, that's the first thing you see. I mean, for lack of a better word, it really is a very cool, tiny little space that you feel when you walk in, like you're a part of it.
Yeah, and I think spaces like that I actually really love. I sort of really love these ideas of these small shows, maybe like half a dozen, 10 works, because you can sort of create a world. The intimacy of it, I think, is really key. And hopefully, I mean, if I'm doing my job right, you don't need to read a single word on the wall, and you could just get it. But it's hard. It's hard to communicate that, but it's much easier when we have great art.
Oh, yeah.
So that
yeah, that helps.
This came together very quickly because the art just was there, and it just spoke to it. And to put that Oliver Lee Jackson piece on the wall, right when you walk in, I mean, there was no other option. I mean,
right. Yeah.
You know, why would you put it anywhere else?
Right.
You know?
Exactly. But I think that you captured it really well with the word intimacy. That space in and of itself is like a nice little, a quieter or more intimate aside that you can go into. And honestly, the only other thing you could add to it would be music. I mean, you know,
Right.
So it is truly a beautiful arrangement you did. And I hope you're very proud of that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely happy with it. I was just happy to see those works in storage that sort of, like I said, don't really get the light of day. I mean, a William T. Williams, you know, hand-colored monoprint and a beautiful work by Betty Blayton. I mean, these artists that are so significant. And these were works that we were acquiring in the 80s. You know, there are other works, of course, on the walls that sort of play into this. We have a really huge Gene Davis painting in Gallery 20, which is the Modern and Contemporary Gallery. And we also have a small sort of intimate Gene Davis print in the Modern Rhythms show. So I try to make those connections as well. But even across from the Gene Davis, in terms of our acquisition history, something that blows my mind and I think is so significant and important for this museum is that we acquired 2 major Sam Gilliam paintings in the 1970s. They're just incredible. And back to what I was saying before, you know, if you can get people in the door with a collection of Kirk Hammett's collection of horror posters, and then they walk in and they go upstairs and then they see the Sam Gilliam. I mean, I think we're firing on all cylinders.
Michael Neumeister is the new curator here at the Columbia Museum of Art. And his first installation, Modern Rhythms, is on view in a low-light gallery located on the 2nd floor of the museum. Come on in and check it out today. We'll turn the light on for you. You know, when I think about the word preservation and the act of preserving something, you know, I go back to thinking about one of my roles as a poet, as a writer. So much of what we're trying to do is capture a world around us that's ever moving, ever changing, always sort of in a state of destruction. You know, nature certainly has powerful actions that can destroy and deconstruct things that we've built. Life in general has a way of destroying itself, primarily by our own hands. But as writers and poets, we're constantly wanting to preserve moments in time, whether it be from our memory or in the moment, the exact moment that we are witnessing and writing. And by doing so, we are, in many ways, the preservationists of the world. Not so much in the sense that we never want to see things change. I think that's a given in life that things will change. But can we still hold on or keep certain aspects, certain essences of the things that make us who we are? Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But if we're not reminded of them, if we're not able to witness them, then we're only doomed to repeat a lot of the stupid things we do. So if you see a poet and you see a writer, it's not weird to thank them. We need them. You've been listening to Binder, a production of Columbia Museum of Art. Today's episode was hosted by me, Ray McManus, produced and edited by Drew Barron, with special assistance from Joel Ryan Cook. For more information about Binder, CMA exhibitions, and programs, please visit our website at www.columbiamuseum.org. Man, that sounded, I love that montage. It was great, man. You know, I mean, it's like,